You all know the manufacturing world and the ecosystem ranges from some entities and enterprises that are truly cutting edge and world class, and some which probably we would have read about in any of the Dickens books. The Bangalore factories in Firozabad at one end would fall in the latter, and the medical diagnostics and the aerospace, electronics, machining, that kind of world would fall in the former case. Let me take you very quickly with a few examples of where manufacturing is going. There's a company called Aspironics. It's an Israeli company which has made a medical device which is the size of a credit card, and that allows you to kind of deliver any kind of drug, especially for asthma at this particular juncture. The beauty of this particular product is it's a one-time delivery product which will cost you less than 100 rupees. But it includes technology that is a mashup from credit card miniaturization, fluid flow, and a mix of principles from aerospace turbine engine. Because there's a kind of a device, a very miniaturized fan that moves and causes a powder drug to go into the bloodstream, and that's far more effective than inhaling. SKL MedTech is a technical textile company from Tirupur that has developed a light fabric for attenuation of X-rays, and it completely replaces the 8.5 kg apron that a radiologist wears, and it's first of its kind in the world. Chaparral Steel is another very interesting company which completely changed the way steel manufacturing is done. It redefined the scale in steel manufacturing. It's a mini mill, and the input to the mini mill is based out of scrap. So automobile scrap or any other scrap all over the world, and there's a large cupola, an electric furnace where this scrap is melted and you get steel of very high quality. So suddenly the scale changes. You no longer have a blast furnace and the kind of area, space, energy efficiency, all of those requirements that accompany steel production. Bolt is a enabling organization. It's a incubator, accelerator, supply chain, whatever you may want to say. It's a company where you could go with a new product. It will help you design, it will help you fabricate, it will help you produce, and it will help you distribute. So you could be an individual designer, individual entrepreneur, and you want 250 pieces of a new version of this kind of a product. They'll do all of that for you, and you don't need to have a factory. So it completely changes the nature of enabling of a new enterprise, and it brings your innovation into the market that much more rapidly without the kind of investment that we think of in manufacturing. LLMS is interesting. It's a last mile mobile service which was developed by World Vision for managing delivery of services to in remote areas. Interestingly, it's a hardware along with the software that then was developed by them but got produced, now is getting produced by manufacturers in China. What I wanted to point to you is the most unlikely place from which manufacturing innovation could happen. PBW is a company out of Rajkot, and that it's a company that manufactures bearings and bushings for diesel engines. And one fine morning, they get a phone call saying, I have a ship that is stuck in Atlantic Ocean. I have a compressor where this kind of a bearing is needed. Can you deliver it to me in 24 hours? So these guys go to Alang, find a compressor of that same kind, pull up the bearing out, fabricate a new one, and ship it out in 48 hours. Since then, they've developed now a 150 crore business of delivering 1 and 2 pieces of this bearing anywhere in the world. But of course, now they have a design support. They don't need to go to Alang. They have a CAD library which does that. So the world of manufacturing has changed very dramatically. The kind of enablers who are there, people who take you to the market, those who develop for you, the kind of support that you get is extremely different. In fact, very facetiously, and I don't mean it, but one can say, with these, why do you need roads? Now, what are the key markers of Indian manufacturing in recent times? There's a very interesting book which talks about how have certain countries been able to escape the middle income trap by developing technological capabilities in manufacturing. And these are termed as short cycle technologies, or sectors of industry, or segments of existing industries where accreted knowledge is not very high, and where you can enter in a sector without the burden of past knowledge. And in 70s and 80s, technologies related, digital technology in TV, radio, all those kind of things fell in that category. Firms, and the hypothesis there is that firms that would produce short cycle technologies of this particular kind are able to get rapid gains on the economic growth, and those who don't get that advantage. And many of our traditional firms in which we compete are in non-short cycle technology areas. We all know about the Nokia and Foxconn issue, and whatever happened, this Nokia's plant was the largest mobile plant in the world, producing 13 million mobile phones a month. But that's not where the damage lay when they closed it down. The damage was Foxconn, which is the component supplier to Nokia, was actually planning to set up a plant in Sriperumbudur to produce iPhones, iPads, and all the components, which they moved to Brazil. And as it's expected that over a 7 to 8 year period, it'll generate 80,000 jobs. And we lost 80,000 jobs in that entire process through a variety of reasons there. The new manufacturing initiatives that are being talked about, and defense is being seen as one of the biggest areas where the offset requirements, investments are going to come, offsets are coming. But the question on where is the talent for manufacturing, and especially advanced skills that are needed for purposes of doing these offset manufacturing exists. And same relates to the technological capabilities. For most of our firms, the distance from global supply chains is very high. There are very few firms in our manufacturing ecosystem who are very tightly coupled with the Foxconns and the Flextronics and other large firms globally. The ties between firms, manufacturing firms, and this is all, we do a survey of 1,000 manufacturing companies across 10 sectors every 5 years, and we've been doing it for 20 years. So I'm just pulling out a bunch of insights from there, but if anybody's interested, I could lead you to both the papers and the data on this. This is a typical characteristic of of our manufacturing ecosystem, that much of the gain in productivity is coming from investment in new equipment. But economic rents arise when we use that gain in equipment investment and build process and product-related productivity on top of it. Then the next time when we're going to invest in technology, we are at a much higher base than what we would be otherwise. We're missing institutions that are very effective, that generally are effective in promoting and coordinating activities of productivity across firms and tech diffusion, commercialization, manufacturing data and productivity. There's hardly any data available on shop floors. Much of what is available is of macroeconomic nature, but rarely links to anybody's ability to develop a very, very deep thinking process on manufacturing policy. Manufacturing education is, again, a very missing link. And I mean manufacturing education and not engineering education, because there is a little bit of a translation from engineering skills into what happens on the production shop floor. And lastly, we also have, across different sectors of industry, very incomplete manufacturing ecosystem. And let me explain what I mean here. So here is a typical ecosystem. This is the pull, which pulls much of production that seems to be happening in any sector. You have component production, prototyping, design, pulled by product R&D, process or on the shop floors. Then there's assembly of process technology, the toolings, and then there's the distribution part of it. Now, the biggest opportunity that lies in photovoltaic cells, et cetera, is timed many a times simply because to put them together, you need a silver paste. And there's no manufacture of silver paste in India. For mobile assembly and manufacturing, so we had this in Nokia, but all of these, the cells, the plastic molding, the equipment that goes with plastic molding, the metal body, all of that which fall in these categories, or the equipment that would go in here, are missing from our manufacturing ecosystem in many of our industrial sectors, which deter large-scale manufacturers from looking at India in terms of investment, despite a large market in many product domains, or using us as a base for exporting. So the question is, can policy nudge development of deep technological capabilities and these linkages that one talk about? Now, to do that, we feel that there needs the three strategy debates that need to be addressed, and addressed a little bit differently. And these are not very tight arguments, but at the same point of time, the directions in which one can start to think. So competitiveness in manufacturing would depend on what we do, how we do, what is it that we are producing, and who's producing these things. The three questions as follows. There's this tension in the country in terms of whether we should be large volume producers or we should be high variety producers. And both are managerially very different kind of settings. Both require very different capabilities. They require very different enabling processes, different institutions to help them grow. Same is with labor versus capital intensive. There's a very strong belief in certain quarters which feels that India can readjust its labor engagement from one sector into another with very easy translation and entry of skills. And the last is this issue of high-tech versus low-tech, which is linked to the second one. Now, there's an interesting dichotomy that we find in India. Most of our small firms want to become ancillaries of large units. And that means you want to have an order, and there are reasons why they want it, to produce standard products repeatedly over a period of time. But actually, mass manufacturing, which is either large volume or large number of firms producing standard product, they compete on cost and efficiency, cost, utilization, availability of resources, synchronized production environment, synchronized supply chains, while high variety competes on design, process capabilities, process flexibility, precision, and so on and so forth. So the two types of skills are very different. So keeping all of this at the back of the mind, the fulcrum for Indian manufacturing needs to shift a little bit, and based on three broad areas. One, which is on science and technology-driven entrepreneurship, which is actually much more focused on small, high-variety firms that are very nimble, capable of doing very different things, and for which different ideas need to fuse. Different kind of companies mash up the kind of examples that I mentioned to you, Aspironics, different incubators and clusters that come with their own ecosystem. The second is we're focusing actually largely on the factory. That's where much of our attention of Indian manufacturing is going, but the value add is on all stages other than the factory. The product design, the process engineering part of it, and we've really not explored gains that might come out of it, and that's another area where we would see enormous gains. And the third is on crossover productivity, which is use of IT in manufacturing is very minimal. Largely, we're doing transaction kind of capabilities, but planning, scheduling, inventory, or replacing hardware with software, that kind of innovation is not yet seen here. And that would take very different kind of gains altogether. And lastly, we would need to see different enabling institutions that will allow all of these three things to happen. So I think we need to pivot a little bit differently, focus on innovation, invest in R&D, create structures or ecosystems that are far more complete by focusing on a few sectors to begin with, while allowing others to continue as they do for the time being. And hopefully that might make much of this effort on manufacturing reap far greater gains than what we would do otherwise. Thank you.